These master objects are so called because they apply to the entire machine. All objects have a name and a number. When you start saving your own objects, the 2500 picks the first available number. Different types of objects can have the same number. For instance, you can have a sample 200, Keymap 200, and program 200. Since the objects are different types, the 2500 can tell them apart. We have already seen how to put programs into setups and quick access banks. Let's look at how to use samples and keymaps to create a program. Start in program mode and call up program 199, which is the default program. Press Edit to go into the program editor, then select the Keymap soft button. As we did before, we'll call up a new keymap. Select 168, which is silence. Now press Edit again. This takes you into the Keymap editor, which is the page where you can assign different samples to ranges on the keyboard. Notice that a sample called silence is assigned across the entire range of the keyboard. Assigning a new sample is quite easy. Press the Assign button. The 2500 asks you to select a sample. We'll choose number 40, the ride bell. Press OK. Now the 2500 asks you to strike a low key and then a high key. Let's choose C4 for the low and G4 for the high. The display will return to the Keymap edit page showing our sample assigned to the keys we struck. Let's do one more. Press Assign again. This time choose sample number 75, the conga tone. Assign it from C3 to G3. If you play across the keyboard, you will hear the two samples playing in their note ranges. Now let's examine our keymap. The screen only shows you one range at a time, but by scrolling through the key range parameter, we can see that we now have silence assigned from C2 to B2. We have sample number 75 from C3 to G3, and then silence again from G#3 to B3, and then the ride symbol number 40 from C4 to G4, and then silence again from G#4 to G10. An important thing to understand about a keymap is that it's like a string with different beads on it. For a regular keymap, you cannot have more than one sample assigned to a note, and you can't have nothing assigned to a note or group of notes. There will always be a sample assigned, even if it is silence. The only situation where you can have more than one sample assigned to a note is in the case of velocity switching keymaps. Please refer to your manual for more on this. As you have noticed, the sample transposes as you play it up and down the keyboard. In fact, the sample is transposed according to where its root key is defined. We put the root key in the name of all our samples to make it easier when you construct a keymap. Now let's go back to the key range for sample 75. As you can see, the sample root is C4. But we have assigned it from C3 to G3. So we are hearing the sample transposed down an octave when we strike the C. We can change it so the sample plays at its original pitch by using the coarse tune parameter to transpose the sample back up. By setting coarse tune to 12 semitones, we can transpose the sample back up an octave so that the original pitch now plays at C3. You can use the fine-tune parameter for subtle tuning changes. Now let's look at the other parameters on the page. The New Range soft button allows you to quickly change the range of keys assigned to the currently displayed sample. The Volume Adjust parameter allows you to even out the volumes of various samples in the keymap without having to go into the sample editor and change the actual sample. And Master Transpose will transpose the entire keymap up or down the keyboard. Although it is beyond the scope of this video to cover sampling, we're going to take a brief detour and show you the sample editor. If you press Edit while in the Keymap editor, you will jump into the sample editor. This is where you can change the start, end, and loop points of a sample and make other modifications. The sample you will be editing was the one that was currently displayed in the Keymap editor. If you press the miscellaneous soft button, you will see the root key number, which we have just been referring to. Press Exit to leave the sample editor, and you are back on the Keymap editor page. One more thing before we finish here. While you are on this page, if you press the MIDI mode button, the 2500 will jump to the sampling page. That's where you'll do all your own sampling. You can also get to the sampling page from the master mode page, but this is a very useful way to get to sampling. By starting on the default program with silence as the Keymap, you can jump into the sampler, create the samples you need, then when you press Exit, you're back in the Keymap editor, ready to assign your new samples across the keyboard. Now that we've created a Keymap, you can name it and save it. Remember that since you started with silence, this new Keymap has that name. If you don't rename it, you can get confused with lots of Keymaps all named silence. Once you've saved, if you press Exit, you're back on the Keymap page in the program editor, and your new Keymap has been selected. You're ready to create a program with it. Now let's delve into the heart of the K2500 variable architecture synthesis. VAST gives you an outstanding array of tools with which you can modify and control your sounds. We'll try and give you some ideas of the possibilities. Once you understand the basics, we encourage you to experiment and create your own sounds. First, we need to talk about VAST algorithms. This is the heart of VAST. An algorithm is very simply a signal processing path. It controls how your audio signal is routed. When you first press Edit in the program mode, you'll find yourself on the algorithm page. If you highlight the algorithm parameter and scroll through the different algorithms, you will notice that they consist of between 3 and 5 boxes. Each of these boxes is some kind of processing function, whether it is a filter, amplification, or some other type of function. Notice that with the exception of the last couple of algorithms, the first box is always labeled pitch. The last one is always labeled amp, although there are sometimes different amp variations. But depending on the algorithm you choose, you will have a choice of different DSP functions. If you look in the reference section in the manual, you will see diagrams for each algorithm along with all possible DSPs for each algorithm. You will also notice that there are 5 arrows above the boxes. Each arrow corresponds to a control page in the program editor, allowing you many real-time and fixed controls over each particular function. Since the first box is always labeled pitch, the control page soft button is also labeled pitch, which you will see as soon as you go into the program editor. If you press the right More button, you will see 4 soft buttons labeled F1 through F4. Each soft button also contains an abbreviated name for the particular DSP. Since these can change depending on which algorithm and which DSP functions you pick, the labels on the soft buttons will change as well. Press the F1 button. You are now looking at the control page for the first DSP function after the initial pitch function. All of the control pages look nearly identical. What you are controlling changes with the DSP that you pick, but the methods of controlling them are basically all the same. So once you get used to looking at this page, you can apply your knowledge to all of the control pages. On the left side, you will see parameters for coarse and fine adjustments. If you were looking at a filter page, these would represent a cutoff frequency. If you were looking at an amp page, you would be looking at an amount of dB. Kurzweil uses real measurements for all of the DSPs, not some arbitrary number between 1 and 127. On the left side, you will also see parameters for velocity tracking and key tracking. On the right side, you'll see parameters for setting control sources, such as LFO or envelope, or for using a physical controller, such as a mod wheel or pedal. On the 2500, just about anything can be used to control anything else. It is by using these control capabilities that you can breathe life into your sounds. Press exit, and then no if it asks you if you want to save. Now that we have given you a general overview of VAST, let's get into programming a patch so you can see how to put these concepts into action. Call up program 199, the default program, and press edit. Now press the Keymap soft button and change the keymap to number 151. This is the sawtooth waveform. Now press the algorithm soft button and the cursor up button. Change the algorithm to number 9. Now cursor back down and set the second box to saw plus. Cursor to the next box and set it also to saw plus. Finally, cursor to the next box and set that to LP2 res. What we have done is created an algorithm where we start with an initial sawtooth waveform and add 2 more sawtooth waveforms, then pass them through a 2-pole low-pass filter with built-in resonance. What's really great is that the 2 additional waveforms are created by VAST DSPs, so they don't take up any additional voices of polyphony. This means that we have 3 oscillators playing, but we're only using 1 voice of polyphony. When you first select the filter DSP, it defaults to a fairly low cutoff, so that we can more clearly hear the changes we'll be making. We are going to temporarily raise the cutoff. While the filter DSP is still highlighted, press edit. This will jump you directly to the control page for the filter. Using the data wheel, set the course parameter to C8, which is 4186 Hertz. If you play the keyboard now, you'll notice that it sounds like part of the sound changes pitch with the keys, but the other parts stay in the same pitch. This is because the 2 sawtooth waveform DSPs are not set to have any key tracking. Let's fix this. Press the right more button so that you see the F1 through F4 soft buttons. Notice that both F1 and F2 have pitch on the buttons. This is short for pitch and indicates that the control pages will be controlling pitch of these oscillators. Press F1, scroll down and set key tracking to 100 cents per key. Press the F2 button and do the same thing. Now if you play your keyboard, you'll hear everything changing pitch as you play up and down. Next, we'll detune the oscillators to give the program a fatter, more analog sound. Go back to the F1 page and change the fine parameter to -7 cents. You can use the plus/minus button on the keypad to enter negative numbers. Since there are 100 cents per semitone, this is only a small amount of detuning. Now go to the F2 page and set the fine to 3 cents. We will also drop this oscillator down an octave by setting the course parameter to -12 semitones. Next, we're going to set the mod wheel to open and close the filter, controlling the brightness of the sound. We'll go back to the filter page, this time by pressing F3. Notice that it's labeled frequency, showing you're on the controlling the cutoff frequency of the filter. Set the course parameter to C4, which is 262 Hertz. This closes the filter down so the sound is almost muffled. Now we'll assign the mod wheel to control the filter. Scroll over to the source 1 parameter. We offer an extremely wide range of control sources, and it can take a while to scroll through them. So Kurzweil gives you an easy way to call up a control source called intuitive entry. Press and hold the Enter button, then move the mod wheel on your keyboard. If the mod wheel on your keyboard is set to send MIDI controller 1, then the display should change to M wheel. Next, set the depth parameter to 6,500 cents. Now, if you strike a note and move the mod wheel, you'll hear the filter open and close. You'll also hear that characteristic wow that comes with using resonance on a filter, because the filter we have chosen has resonance automatically added. Next, we'll use an LFO to control pitch, which will give us vibrato. Press the left More button and select the Pitch Soft button. Scroll to Source 2. We are going to assign this to LFO. Here's an editing shortcut that works like intuitive entry. Hold Enter and strike B5, which is the second B above middle C. The display will change to LFO1. Each of the internal control sources is assigned to a key. If you have certain control sources you use over and over again, you can quickly call them up by memorizing which key they're assigned to. Next, we'll set the speed of the LFO. Press the right More button till you see the LFO soft button and select it. Set the minimum rate for LFO1 to 5.50 Hertz. Leave the rest of the parameters as they are. Now here's another shortcut. We need to go back to the pitch page. Instead of using the More buttons to get back, press the MIDI mode button, which is also marked Previous Page in green. The 2500 jumps right back to the pitch page. Now we'll control the amount of vibrato with Aftertouch. Highlight the depth parameter. Hold Enter and press D2, which is the second D below middle C. This selects mono pressure. If your keyboard has poly pressure and you want to use it, hold Enter and press B4. If your keyboard doesn't have pressure at all, you might want to use the mod wheel. Finally, set the maximum depth to 30 cents. Now when you play, the harder you press, the more vibrato is added. Next, we're going to program an amplitude envelope to control the shape of the sound. Scroll with the More buttons till you see Amp Envelope and select it. The screen comes up with the default natural envelope setting. There's an envelope for each sampled instrument that is already programmed to follow the natural contour of that instrument. But if you switch the parameter to User, you can create your own envelope. The screen changes to give you access to the 7 envelope stages and a graphic representation of the envelope. There are 2 parts to the graphic. The first represents what happens when you press down a key. The second is what happens when you let go of the key. For those of you who are used to a typical ADSR, the 2500 envelope may look a little different, but it really is quite easy to work with. For each stage in an envelope, there are 2 parameters. The first is how much time it takes to go through that stage. The second is how much amplitude you will have at the end of the stage. When a key is struck, the 2500 will pass through the 3 attack stages and end at the decay stage. When you let go of the key, it will immediately jump to the first release stage and go right on through to the last release stage. Although there is no sustain parameter, you can obtain sustain by setting the decay amount higher than 0%. When you first choose a user envelope, the default settings sound like this. We'll change it to the following amounts. We'll leave the first attack stage at its defaults, but set the attack 2 time to 0.20 and the amount to 50%. Next, we'll set the decay stage to 1 second and the amount to 43%. Finally, let's set the release 1 time to 2 seconds and the amount to 0. Notice that there are soft buttons marked envelope 2 and envelope 3. Though the amplitude envelope will always control amplitude, these 2 envelopes can be routed to anything, such as opening and closing a filter, or controlling an LFO. In addition, you will also find a page with settings for 2 ASRs, which are simplified envelopes that can also be used to control anything you want. Now we'll add another layer to our program to create an even bigger sound. Press either of the More buttons until you get to the set of soft buttons that start with New Layer. This set of buttons lets you add and delete layers to your program. When adding, you can add a default layer, duplicate the current layer, or even import a layer from another program. Let's duplicate this layer by pressing the Dupe Layer button. Notice the display now shows we are on layer 2 of 2. With 2 layers, our patch is starting to get too loud. So we'll bring down the volume of both layers. Scroll and select the F4 amplitude page. We will set the adjust parameter for each layer to 2 decibels. Remember that when you switch from layer to layer using the Layer Zone buttons to the left of the display, and that you can listen to the individual layers by using the mute buttons. Now scroll and select the Layer button. We are going to add some delay to layer 2 so that it starts a little after the first layer. Set the delay control parameter to on. Then set the maximum delay to 40 milliseconds. Next, we will set the outputs for each layer. Press the right More button till you see output and press that button. This page allows you to choose the output pair and panning for each layer. If you wanted to use a single out, you would choose a particular pair, then pan it hard left or hard right. We will leave both layers set to the A-FX output pair. Remember that everything comes out of the mix outs unless you plug a cable into the separate out. Another thing to understand is that to route a sound through the effects processor, you must assign it to the A pair. But the effects only come out of the mix outs. The actual A separate outs are dry. So to use the internal effects, make sure you route the layer to A and then have cables plugged into the mix outs and not the A separate outs. The panning is determined by the pan and the mode parameters. The mode parameter has several values. The default is plus MIDI. This setting takes the initial setting of the pan parameter and will change if you send MIDI controller 10, the pan control. If it is set to fixed, it will stay at the settings you set for the pan parameter and will ignore controller 10. Auto and reverse will determine the pan position based on the key range. In other words, as you play across the keyboard, the pan position will move. Auto moves left to right as you go up the keyboard. Reverse is good for a string section, mimicking the way a string section sets up, with the basses on the left and the violins at the right. Let's set layer 2, which we're currently on, hard right, and layer 1, hard left. Remember, you switch layers using the layer zone buttons to the left of the display. We'll leave the mode on plus MIDI for both layers. Now let's add an effect to our patch. Press the Effect Soft button, then choose Effect number 1. So, now set a wet-dry mix of 35%. This will be an initial level. We're going to program a controller to change this in real time. If your keyboard has a data slider, use that. If it doesn't, you could try another controller such as a continuous pedal or even the mod wheel. Scroll over to the source parameter. Once again, you can use intuitive entry. Just hold the enter button and move your controller. Then set the depth to 30%. While you're editing, if you want to listen to your sound without effects, you can press the effects button and the signal will temporarily bypass the effects processor. Just press effects again to add the effects back in. Although our sound is complete at this point, we'll add one more thing to demonstrate some more features. Press either of the More buttons till you see the Import Layer Soft button, and press it. From this page, you can import any layer from any other program. While on this page, you will hear the layer you have selected, along with the layers you already have in your program. Press the Mute 1 and Mute 2 buttons to hear only the layer that you are importing. You can scroll through various programs. Then, when you find the program you want, use the Layer Zone buttons to select the particular layer that you want. Let's choose Layer 1 from Program 35. Now press Import. The screen shows you that Layer 3 was imported and returns you to the previous screen you were on. Now use the More buttons, select the layer page once again. We're going to program things so that you can use the Sustain pedal to switch between this new layer and the other two layers. First, we will set each layer so that it will not sustain when it gets the Sustain pedal controller. Scroll to the parameter that says Sus pedal and turn it off for each layer. Next, scroll over to the parameter that says Enable and set it to Sustain for each layer. Just like with the mod wheel, you can do this quickly by holding Enter and stepping on the Sustain pedal. Finally, scroll down one parameter where it simply says S. This stands for sensitivity. Set layers 1 and 2 to reverse and leave layer 3 on normal. The sensitivity parameter works in conjunction with the two numbered values you see immediately to the right. These are the minimum and maximum values for the selected controller. Notice they are set to 64 and 127. These would constitute the on values for any switch controller. The off values would be 0 through 63. So now, when the Sustain pedal is turned on by stepping on it, you will hear layer 3. And when the pedal is off, you will hear layers 1 and 2. First, I'll unmute the first two layers.